So good to see everyone tonight. I'm glad you're all here. Is there anybody that has a favorite Bible character, a favorite Bible person? Favorites. Anybody have a favorite? Yeah. Jesus. Can't go wrong there. Sister Eden. Esther. Very good, very good. Anybody else? Favorite Bible person? Joseph. Yeah. Anybody else? Daniel. Yeah. So what's amazing? Oh, Sister Joanne, go ahead. I'm sorry? Mary Magdalene. Right. So what's amazing?
Tell you why?
Oh, sure.
Because she chose the good part.
She did.
She sat at his feet.
Right. So it's amazing the stories and the testimonies that we have that we can read. And Jesus said, "Search the Scriptures. In them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me." And so when we're talking about Joseph or Daniel or Esther, we're really learning about Jesus, and that there's layers and depths to these stories beyond just the narrative that's up front. There's gold nuggets we can draw out. And so nobody said Samson, but the last few weeks I've been reading Samson and just chewing and meditating on his life and his story. And there are some just amazing things that we can draw out of that story. So I'd like to jump in to Judges 14. And we find the story of Samson in the chapters 13 through 16. And I'm just going to jump in the middle of the chapter here. Judges chapter 14, beginning at verse 5. Judges 14:5. And it says, "So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. And now to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand, but he did not tell his father or mother what he had done." Jumping down a little further to verse 8, after some time when he had returned to get her, this would be his wife, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. And so a little further, we're going to jump down again. He's throwing a wedding feast, and there's a group of gentlemen that are invited to join him and be his companions, and he poses a riddle to them, and it has to do with this encounter he had with the lion. He says in verse 14, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." So we have a riddle here, and I would like to suggest, well, I'll try to my best effort to put the pieces together here, but that this riddle is speaking of the life of Samson in general. That Samson's life could be summarized in this riddle that he poses. That out of the lion, the thing that came to destroy him, something sweet came out of it. And so I'm going to start at the beginning here, as every story should. Samson, his story begins in chapter 13. I'm going to read the first few verses of chapter 13. "Again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. That's a generation, 40 years. "There was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, 'Indeed, now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, or not to eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines.'" So we see that this child that is coming, this is a special child. The mother, she was not able to conceive. She was barren, and an angel visits her. And through this encounter with the angel, she's told she's going to have a miracle baby. that God's going to open her womb. And beyond that, he speaks to how to raise this young man, how to raise this child, that he was going to be a Nazarite. And so we're getting into what Moses referred to in Numbers chapter 6, that someone would be separated and consecrated and set apart. It specifically had to do with their diet as well as the hair. The hair was not cut. And the big prohibition with a Nazarite was no grapes, no raisins, no wine, no vinegar. Just stay away from all of that. And that was part of the vow and the consecration of them being set apart to the Lord. So we're told this child is going to be a Nazarite. And also we gain some insight into his purpose, being that this is a special child that is going to be born. He's going to be someone who brings deliverance to God's people, who delivers them out of the hand of the Philistines. And it's very interesting. We see that his name, Samson, it means sunlight. It means like the sun. He's bringing light. He has likeness like the sun. He's bringing light. And this is perhaps giving us more insight into his purpose. And so just from this little bit, we can start drawing some parallels to the Christ, to the Son of God. He was also foretold by an angel that this birth would happen, and it was a miraculous birth. A woman that had not known a man, that's a miraculous birth. And he was also set apart and consecrated. Not a Nazarite necessarily, but he was set apart and consecrated to God, and he was also a deliverer, delivering his people out of the hand of the enemy. And so we also see some foreshadowing that God is looking for sons or sons and daughters who are set apart and consecrated in their generation to bring light and to overcome the enemy in their day among their people in their generation. Continuing on, in chapter 13, at the end of the chapter, 24 and 25, we see that the birth of this child comes. So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Manaah, Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. And so we see that the Spirit of God in an unnatural or unusual way is resting upon this man, even as he's growing up, that he's growing and developing and maturing, and that the blessing of God and the Spirit of God is upon him. And we find a similar reference in the New Testament that Jesus was growing in both stature and favor in the sight of God and in the sight of man. So there's this parallel between Samson and the Messiah. So we don't get a lot of insight about his childhood, but we enter into at least young adulthood or adulthood. He's of age, it would appear in chapter 14. And I'm going to pick up there. It says, "Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughter of the Philistines." And what's interesting about Timnah, the word Timnah means portion, an allotment. It comes from the word manah, which means to weigh out or to appoint. So he's going to the portion of the Philistines looking for a wife. So it's very interesting. And so he's leaving his portion. He's leaving Israel. He's leaving the place where God's people are, and he's going outside of it. So he's going down to Timnah, continuing in verse 2. "So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, 'I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore go get her for me as a wife.'" He goes, "I found what I'm looking for. Go get her." And there's some pushback here, thankfully. His father and mother said to him, "Is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren, among all of my people, that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" And Samson said to his father, "Get her for me, for she pleases me well." And this statement, "she pleases me well," it kind of brings up maybe 1 Samuel 8. Israel's asking for a king and saying, "We don't want you, God, we want a man instead." Or maybe it's Lot picking a wife among the people of Sodom. Or maybe this is Esau, who goes against his parents' wishes in Genesis 28 and takes a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And so we see that we can want things that are not right for us and pursue them and get them, and it's not good. Continuing on, his father and mother did not know that this was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. For at that time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So God is using the life of Samson in this time. Even though he's stepping out of where he should be, out of his portion, out of his place, God says, I'm going to use that as an opportunity. I'm going to use this as an occasion to begin to bring deliverance and victory over the enemy, over the Philistines. And so God uses Samson's ungodly, perhaps maybe misaligned desires of what is good or what is pleasing to bring an opportunity to bring victory to his people. And so we continue on in Judges 14. Samson goes down to Timnah with his father and mother, and he comes to the vineyards of Timnah. Vineyards, like where they grow grapes, where they have vines. And so we see not only is he outside of his portion, he's walking a very fine line to violating his consecration and the commitment he made to the Lord as a Nazirite. And we start to see within Samson that there's maybe some character flaws here. You know, God is going to use him in some ways, but there are some significant shortcomings. You know, he's been separated from his birth. He's abstaining from the grapes, from anything from the vine, but he's in the Philistine land, in the Philistine territory, in the place that's known for the grapes, the vineyards. And so it's like we're starting to get some insight into the character of Samson. While he's here, outside of Israel, in enemy territory, outside of his portion, this is where we run into the lion. Verse 5, so Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him. Should it be a surprise when we're outside of our boundaries, we encounter the enemy? He's probably standing at the line waiting for us, honestly. And, you know, the Spirit of the Lord is still with Samson. It says in verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. And so he encountered this lion in this place, the vineyards at Timnah. He kills it, tears it apart like it was a little helpless animal. And he doesn't tell his father and mother. And he continues on. In verse 7, he went down and talked with the woman of interest in Timnah, and she pleased him well. And verse 8, after some time, when he returned to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. So we see that after some time, he returns to this lion, returns to this situation, and inside the carcass of this dead animal is something sweet, is something pleasant, is something beautiful. And I believe this is speaking prophetically of Samson's life, that the situations he puts himself in and chooses ultimately is not good. It's an encounter with a lion and something leaves dead. And out of that, though, something sweet comes, something good comes. But he has this encounter, he comes back and returns, he sees the honey in the lion, he sees the bees in the lion, and then he continues to go down to take his wife. And so verse 9, he took some up in his hands, he went along eating. Part of the Nazirite is not to eat an unclean thing. So there's like, is that violating? I'm not sure. It's definitely not the direction he should be going. And furthermore, he gives it to his parents, we find continuing on in this verse. He doesn't tell them where he got it from. And so we see boundaries, lots of boundaries being broken, boundaries being violated. And so they go down, verse 10, his father went down to the woman, and Samson gave a feast there, for young men used to do so. This would be a wedding feast before the marriage becomes official. And verse 11, it happened that when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And so they gathered some local guys together to celebrate this wedding, him getting married, as the custom likely was. And as they're having this celebration, this party over a period of days, Samson poses a riddle to them. And we see it in verse 12. He says, "Let me pose a riddle to you. If you can correctly solve and explain it to me within 7 days of the feast, then I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing." And they said to him, "Pose your riddle that we may hear it." So he makes a wager with them. He makes a bet. And it's a very unique riddle, a very unique story. And he challenges them with it. And so they're unable to solve this riddle. And so after a period of time, they come to the to-be wife, and they say to her, in verse 15, "Entice your husband." And so the word entice, it means a number of things, but to open him up. Give us access. You have a way of opening. And so there's something interesting that a woman can open a man. And we go back to the Garden of Eden, and it was a woman and her influence over man that opens up this whole situation. And perhaps this is a retelling of that story in that way. But they say to her, "Open him up, entice him, that he may explain the riddle to us, or we're going to come for you and your father and your house and burn it." And so she begins to press him, and she begins to work on him, and she presses him. And this word entice, we see within the word 4 other words as part of the definition: to press, constrain, to distress, and oppress, and different levels of pressing. So to press is to apply continuous force or weight against something. At that point, you begin to restrict it or limit it and force it to act or not act in ways that it doesn't desire, that person doesn't desire, the thing does not desire. The third thing would be distressing, which is physical or emotional suffering in which the mind or body are unable to cope with stressors. And the last thing would be oppress, which is to control or govern or have the power over. And so she begins to work and work and work, and eventually she gets the answer from him and gives it to the 30 men that have joined to celebrate this wedding, and they get the answer to the riddle. And we see that Samson gets upset. He said, "If you haven't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have got this answer." And basically, it's very interesting that, plowed with my heifer. Mark 3:27 says that to enter a strong man's house, you have to first bind him. You have to restrain him. You have to wrap him up. And then you can spoil his goods. And so to bind is to tie or fasten. And the goods of the house would be vessels or implements, or figuratively, goods could also be, in the New Testament to the Greek, could be a wife as being an implement or a vessel of her husband's house. And so we see that, is Samson already bound because what he has joined himself to? And so the conclusion of this situation is that he loses this riddle, this challenge. He goes to Ashkelon, kills 30 men, takes their garments, pays what he owes, and goes home storming mad. And while he's away, his wife-to-be gets given to someone else. And so we see that what was his is given to someone else. And so there are quite a few parallels we could draw from here. Samson, he leaves his portion, his territory, and he's pursuing a woman. And so we see that God leaves his domain, he leaves his realm, his territory, and he's pursuing a woman in enemy territory. And so the Son of God comes pursuing a bride, a wife, outside of the territory of heaven. And so we see this parallel with Samson in pursuing this woman. The Son of God comes into darkness, a hostile area. It comes into enemy territory outside of his kingdom, outside of his domain, his boundary, his portion, in pursuit of this woman. And we see that this Philistine woman of Timnah is given to another. And we see that Christ came to his own, and his own didn't receive him, given to another. And so these parallels with the life of Samson. The enemy is seeking an opportunity to move against Samson, and we see that expressed in the lion, but we also see the enemy seeking opportunity again and again and again to move against Jesus while he's walking on this earth. And we see that the lion is defeated by Samson. He tears it apart like it was a little piece of paper. And we see that the prince of this earth comes, but ultimately he's the one that's defeated and torn apart, and that God's purpose prevails, even as a lion coming against Jesus, the enemy, the devil coming against Jesus. We see that the woman didn't receive Samson, this woman of Timnah who didn't receive Samson. She was judged by her own people. They came, and because of what Samson did, they took her and her father's house and all of them and burned it to the ground. They totally wiped them out. And we see this is a very similar result. The Jewish people who did not receive Jesus, he said, I would have liked to have gathered you under my wings. Until you say, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord, I can't receive you, and your house is going to be left to you desolate. And we know from history that in AD 70, Titus comes, the Romans, and they totally clean the board, and not one stone is left upon another. So very similar. This woman that didn't receive Samson, Israel who didn't receive her Messiah, her husband, right? There's these parallels. It's very interesting. So looking at this, the lion may come, and it says that the devil is like a lion, roaring, seeking whom he may devour. He's out looking. So we may encounter the lion. We may encounter the enemy. He may come against us. He may roar against us. He may surprise us, as Samson was surprised. But because the Spirit of God is with us, we are able to overcome as Samson did. And we see that with the passing of time, we gain perspective. Many of us, I'm sure, have gone through things that were difficult, were hard, adversity. Maybe we made bad decisions. Maybe we're struggling through situations. But with the passing of time and perspective, the God who works all things for the good, as Pastor Michael shared with us, the God who works all things for the good, with the passing of time, he works it out. And the lion is not the thing we remember. The decaying carcass, the spoiling of a body, this carcass of the lion, it's not what we hear about in this story. It's kind of odd, isn't it? That there's honey and it's a dead thing and he's pulling the honey out of it. But what we can draw away from this is that it's the sweet thing that comes out of it is what's going to be remembered because God's in it. It's not the thing that we faced. It's not the wrestle that we had with this situation or this person or this thing. It's the honey that comes out of it that we're going to remember. That's what we're going to take away because God's working in it. The dead, the decaying, and the difficult are opportunities for God to bring something sweet. That's a takeaway from this situation. So continuing, chapter 15, continue on in the story of Samson and his life. After some time passes again, it's now the wheat harvest. And in chapter 15, he decides, well, maybe I do want to come back for my wife after all. He kind of gets over it, settles down a little bit. And he returns for his wife, and he comes to her house, and he says, "Let me go into my wife, into her room." And her father says, no, he doesn't permit him to go in. And her father says, "I really thought that you thoroughly hated her, therefore I gave her to your best man at your wedding. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her." And this doesn't go over well with Samson. He didn't like that idea. You gave my wife away, and we got option B right here. And so he gets enraged again. And we see that he takes 300 foxes. This is very interesting. How do you even find 300 foxes? I'm not sure. They must have had a sign up and they were all applying. I don't know. But 300 foxes. He ties their tails in a knot, puts a torch, sets it on fire, and lets them loose. It's a releasing of all these foxes, and they're carrying a torch, and everywhere they go, fire is being released and spreading. And we see in verse 5, when he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go 4 places. This is significant. This is really good. 4 places. Number 1, into the standing grain of the Philistines. Number 2, the shocks. Number 3, the vineyards. Number 4, the olive groves. And this is very specific. This is the Philistines. This is in their land. The standing grain. These are the crops that are still growing. They haven't matured yet. This is the future coming harvest for that year. The second thing that gets burned and consumed by fire, the shocks. These are the piles of harvested grain. This is the grain that's been stored from the previous year. This grain is ready for use. It's been prepared and placed in position for use. The third thing, the vineyards, the grapes, and the olive groves, the olives. This spiritually or symbolically is the investments in the infrastructure of the enemy. And so the grain, this is the short-term seasonal. This is a quick turnaround. It's not a long-term play. It's not a long-term investment. You plant it, it grows this season, you eat it this season, maybe you store some for the next year. But this is the short term, smaller investment, it's higher risk. In drought, this thing would perish quicker than some of these other things that get destroyed. The second thing is the stored grain. This is the grain that's been stored. It takes maybe 6 to 8 months to get to maturity, and then they can harvest it and put it aside. So this is everything that's been put aside for the future, but still in a short-term context. It's part of their daily provision. It's part of the daily sustenance. It's this year's food. And it's what's needed for survival. They're waiting on the next harvest. They're eating this as a daily for that time, for that year. The grapes and the olives, this is different. This is the long-term investment. These are the things that you plant, and in 5 to 10 or 20 years, these things become mature and start producing fruit, and you can have the benefit of it. This is the multi-year turnaround, multi-year of growing and waiting. It's less susceptible to risk. A drought isn't likely going to wipe out an olive grove or a vineyard, but there is still some risk there. It's not like the grain, though. The grapes and the olives, it's not for today. It's not for this year. It's maybe not even for this decade. When you're talking grapes and olives in this time, in this context, this is your children's, this is the future. This is the generational prosperity. This is an investment for the future. So it's the grapes and the olives, they're more than a daily staple. It's something that they eat, they certainly would consume, but you make things out of them. Medicine and products and all kinds of other things are developed from them. So it's long-term, enduring, lasting provision and blessing. This is the next generation's prosperity. And so we see that Samson, this sun-like one, this light like one, that the light bringer, this child that was born out of a miracle, he releases 2 by 2 these lit torches into the enemy territory. It's wiping out the grain harvest of this year. It's wiping out the stored harvest of next year. It's wiping out the long-term provisions for the years to come of the enemy. This is the infrastructure. He's totally dismantling, consuming the infrastructure of the enemy, their investments, the things they've been laboring for, the things that they've been working for. And so we can find a lot of parallels in this. One of my favorite scriptures, the latter half of it, 1 John 3:8, the Son of God was manifest to destroy the works of the devil. This word manifest means to make light or make visible, make seen or make known, much like Samson was a sun-like one, bringing light, bringing victory. Jesus was manifest in the earth to destroy, to dismantle, to dissolve, to waste, consume everything the devil has built, everything he has placed, everything he's been working on, planning, designing, building, producing. Future. Satan's not playing a short-term game. Future. We find this parallel between Samson and the Son of God destroying the infrastructure and the investments of the kingdom of darkness and of Satan. And we see Jesus preaching the gospel of the kingdom, taking territory in the kingdom of darkness, bringing light. We see Jesus sending them out 12, 2 by 2, sending out 70, 2 by 2, bringing that same light of the truth to the nations, much like Samson in this situation. So it's amazing. We can see Jesus through Samson. Another parallel I came across in chapter 15, verse 13, we find that in this latter portion of the chapter, he causes all this mayhem and destruction on the fields and the harvest and the crops of the Philistines, and then he kind of wanders off. And all the Philistines now come against Israel and say, this guy is a menace. He's driving us nuts. Give him to us or we're going to come after you. And so a large group of the Israelites come to Samson where he's at and say, we're going to give you to them. And he says, okay, but don't hurt me or come at me yourselves. Just deliver me to them. And they agree to that. And much like Jesus, by his own people, was delivered into the hands of the enemy for judgment, we see Samson in the same way was bound, brought to the Philistines who were intending to put a judgment on him. We see Jesus was bound and brought to the Gentiles for judgment by his own people. And yet again, we have that parallel there. So he's brought to them. The latter half of chapter 15, the Spirit of God comes on him. In verse 14, and the ropes that he was bound with was like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. And he finds this jawbone, a donkey's jawbone. He takes it up in his hand, and he kills 1,000 men with it. And he writes a little song. With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men. I guess songwriting was not his thing. He probably should have just stuck to the whacking. But so he wrote this song. He's celebrating this victory, but he finds himself in this place of Ramoth Lehi, and he becomes very thirsty. And he cries out to the Lord and said, you have given me this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now I shall die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised. So God split the hollow place. He split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he revived. And therefore he called the name of the place On Hakor, which is in Lehi to this day. And so yet again, we can draw a parallel here to Christ. Maybe not the jaw of a donkey, but in the place of the skull, Golgotha, this place, we see him in this place where he had just achieved this victory, but he's so thirsty he's about to perish. And in this hollow place where he drops the jaw of the donkey, in this hollow place, a river opens up. There's a split. And from that he drinks, and his spirit is revived. And this word hollow place comes from the word mortar, as in a cup or a receptacle where something is ground and crushed and made very fine like dust. And perhaps this is foreshadowing to Golgotha, the place of the skull, where the body of Jesus was broken and beaten and crushed. And out of that, it literally says the rocks rent. And the blood is flowing out of his side, and the water's coming out of his side, and the Spirit's coming out. And this becomes the place where all of creation, all of humankind comes to drink of the waters of salvation, the cross, the place of the skull, Golgotha. Similar to this place where Samson had this victory and drank from the waters that God provided. Continuing into chapter 16, I'll read the first few verses there. Samson went to Gaza, enemy territory yet again, and saw a harlot there, not going in the right direction at all, and went into her. And when the Gazites were told, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they were quiet all night, saying, in the morning when it is daylight, we will kill him. And Samson lay low till midnight, and then he arose at midnight and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 gateposts, and pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. And so we see in this chapter, in the beginning here, that in the darkest place, in the darkest time, Samson dismantles the gates of the enemy. And we know that Jesus said to Peter that the gates of hell will not prevail. And it came to its fullness when he descended into the belly of the earth and proclaimed to spirits in prison of his victory, and that he was in this place in the belly of the earth, but he wasn't staying there. And as he left, he completely dismantled the authority and the dominion and the gates of hell, and took it with him when he left, leaving the door open on his way out, because there is no door now. Amen. And so we can find a parallel there with Samson. Continuing in chapter 16, at verse 4, afterward it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So the valley of Sorek, it's interesting. I think anytime we see a name, there's so much to learn by just looking up the word of the name and gaining some insight. So the valley of Sorek is the valley of choice vines, choice grapes, choice wine. And so we have the man who has consecrated himself to stay away from the vine and the grape in the place that's known for the best vines, the best grapes, the best wine. And this is where he's looking for a wife, a woman. And so yet again, the character of Samson and his shortcomings on display for all of us to see. And we find a similar situation. This woman in the valley of Sorek, her name is Delilah, and she gets hired as a specialist on assignment by the enemy, commissioned to get Samson to tell and use his own mouth the source of his strength, the source of his power. And so what we can draw from this is that the enemy does not know. The enemy doesn't know. The enemy wants you to tell. The enemy wants you to reveal. The enemy requires your participation to defeat you. And the enemy will work you to cause you to reveal your commitments and your consecrations to violate them, which will ultimately lead to your defeat. And so we see that the same word is used. They asked Delilah to entice him. It means to open up. And it's interesting that this concept of a woman opening a man, but also a city, from the book of Joshua, a city that has no men is a city that is left open. And so there's these parallels. It's very interesting, the dynamics and the way God made things. But Delilah is on assignment to open him up, to find the source of his strength. And we go through a series of bad decisions, and Samson should have just ran and he stayed, and he should have ran and he stayed. And ultimately, she gets the understanding of the source of his strength, his consecration, and his commitment. And his head is shorn, his hair is cut, and the strength that he had relied on and known leaves him. And so once again, we see that we can draw from the ultimate purpose and outcome of Samson, but we cannot draw from his character. We can't draw from his choices or his habits. But yet, even in this, the purpose of God is accomplished despite his decisions. We see that God uses his life to break the dominion of the Philistines, of the enemies, their rule and reign over the people of Israel. And we see that out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Out of this sequel of bad choices, I don't know if Samson misread Romans, that we should not continue in sin, that grace would abound. Perhaps he misread that one. But he continues in this pattern. But despite all that, God brings good out of his life. In his death, he destroys and overcomes more enemies than in all of his life put together. Just the people that were on the roof of the temple were 3,000. It tells us that the rank and file of the Philistines were all present. And he was placed between the pillars, much like Jesus was placed between two covenants, between two thieves. And there he gives that last measure, the ultimate measure of his life. And through his death, he brings more victory, more conquering to God's people than he did through his whole life of all the battles he fought and all the situations. And we see that Jesus, through his death, brings the ultimate victory that will continue for all time, that brings us victory. So if any of you find yourselves in a situation where maybe the lion caught you by surprise, God can work in that, and he can bring the sweet out of it. With the passing of time, he can work it for the good. But don't take grace for granted. Amen. Get on the right path. Continue to seek God, and he will work it for the good. Amen. Amen.
Many good things to learn from the life of Samson. Some things I learned. The thing about the Bible, I love it. I'd never read that it was Samson's best man.